It wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural earthquake. Friends didn't air on Thursday nights, it owned them. But behind the laughter, the coffee mugs, and the orange couch, the show hid a labyrinth of strange coincidences, near disasters, and unplanned magic that rewrote television history. Some of what happened behind the scenes was hilarious. Some of it was downright bizarre, and others were secrets the studio never meant for fans to find out. So grab a cup of Central Perk coffee because these are 15 weird facts about Friends that will shock you. The show almost had a completely different name. It's hard to imagine Friends being called anything else. But during development, NBC executives cycled through a list of working titles that sound like alternate universes. At first, it was Insomnia Cafe, then Friends Like Us, later, Six of One. Writers Marta Kaufman and David Crane joked that each name sounded like a different show, entirely one about sleep deprivation, one about coffee, one about chaos. Only weeks before the pilot aired, NBC's marketing team pushed for a single catchy word that audiences could chant, Friends. Ironically, they almost rejected it for being too simple. That simplicity would later become genius. It wasn't just a title, it was a promise, one that defined an entire generation. The iconic fountain scene was filmed at 4 a.m. That famous intro, six friends dancing in the fountain, looks carefree. But filming it was anything but fun. The shoot took place on a freezing night at Warner Brothers Ranch in Burbank. The cast had no idea they'd be waiting in real cold water for hours. Matthew Perry later joked, "We were promised warm water, they lied." Jennifer Aniston said they filmed until sunrise, soaked and shivering, while producers blasted upbeat music to keep morale up. None of it was filmed in New York, yet it captured the energy of the city better than any skyline could. The truth? That joyful dance was the result of exhaustion, caffeine, and chaos, and that's exactly why it worked. Jennifer Aniston nearly missed the role of Rachel. When casting began, Jennifer Aniston was already tied to another sitcom called Muddling Through. NBC hesitated to give her the Friends role in case her other show took off. In a twist of fate, Muddling Through got canceled just weeks before Friends premiered. Had it survived, another actress might have become Rachel Green. Producers said Aniston's chemistry in the screen test was like lightning in a bottle. Once she joined, the entire show clicked into place. The weird part? Muddling Through's cancellation was viewed by fans later as destiny, or perhaps the luckiest scheduling accident in television history. Monica's apartment number secretly changed mid-show. In early episodes, Monica's apartment was numbered 5, but something didn't make sense. It was supposed to be on a high floor overlooking the city. So mid-season, without explanation, the number quietly changed to 20. Chandler and Joey's apartment shifted from 4 to 19 as well. The writers never mentioned it, and most fans didn't notice for years. It wasn't a continuity error, it was a set correction for logic's sake. The irony? The low numbers in the first season made it look like the world's most luxurious basement. The fix was subtle, but it became a running inside joke among crew members. The Smelly Cat song was based on a real pet. Phoebe Buffay's bizarre hit, Smelly Cat, became one of the show's most beloved recurring gags. But few fans know it came from a real-life pet. Writer Adam Chase had a dog named Gouda who constantly rolled in garbage his apartment reeked. During a brainstorming session, Lisa Kudrow joked, "That's not a dog problem, that's a cat song." The team laughed and wrote Smelly Cat on a napkin, recording it that same week. Kudrow performed it live, no dubbing, no rehearsal. The off-key charm was 100% authentic. It wasn't just a song about a cat, it was a love letter to imperfection, and it became pop culture history. Ross was written specifically for David Schwimmer. Ross wasn't just cast, he was created. From the moment Friends was conceived, the writers knew exactly who they wanted. David Schwimmer. Marta Kaufman and David Crane had worked with him before and wrote Ross with his voice, his rhythm, even his awkward charm in mind. NBC executives, however, pushed for an open casting call. They wanted a recognizable face. The creators refused, insisting Schwimmer was the only one who could balance the character's vulnerability with his dry humor. At first, Schwimmer almost turned it down. He thought Friends sounded like another superficial sitcom about dating. But when he read the pilot, he realized Ross wasn't just comic relief, he was heartbreak and hope wrapped in sarcasm. Once he signed on, the show's tone locked into place. Even the writers admitted that when they drafted future episodes, they often heard David's voice before anyone else's. The irony? Schwimmer became the first cast member hired and the last to truly realize how massive Friends would become. He went from theater stages in Chicago to leading one of the most watched TV series on Earth. Ross wasn't just a character, he was the emotional compass of Friends. And Schwimmer's subtle humanity made sure audiences never forgot that. The cast didn't like the theme song. I'll Be There For You might be one of television's most famous tunes, but the 6 stars of Friends weren't exactly clapping along behind the scenes. The network insisted on a cheerful, radio-friendly theme, and the Rembrandts were brought in to perform it. The producers even asked the cast to splash and dance in a fountain for the music video. What looks joyful on screen was pure chaos in real life. The shoot began after midnight at Warner Brothers Ranch. The water was freezing, the lights blinding, and the cast members were miserable. Jennifer Aniston later admitted she found the sequence awkward, while Matthew Perry called it cheesy in every possible way. Still, the network loved the footage. The upbeat energy of the song perfectly contrasted the show's underdog tone, 6 struggling New Yorkers trying to make life work. When the single hit radio, it exploded, reaching #1 on Billboard's Hot 100. The Rembrandts went on tour performing it, but the actors never joined them. In interviews, they all agreed they'd never dance in that fountain again. Ironically, that short, exhausting night produced one of the most recognizable intros in history. They might have hated it at the time, but that tune still defines friendship for an entire generation. Courtney Cox turned down Rachel to play Monica. When Friends was in pre-production, NBC executives had one clear idea: Courtney Cox should play Rachel Green. She was already a television favorite and the most famous among the new cast. But Cox read both roles and surprised everyone. She wanted Monica. Rachel's fun, she told producers, but Monica is me-organized, competitive, and secretly vulnerable. The creators hesitated. Rachel was written as the show's centerpiece, and they didn't want to lose Cox's star power. But her conviction was strong enough to change the plan. She argued that Monica could be the group's glue, the steady heartbeat of their chaos. The writers listened, rewrote parts of the character to match Cox's precision, and re-auditioned for Rachel. That's how Jennifer Aniston entered the picture, completing the most iconic duo in sitcom history. Ironically, that one decision transformed Friends' chemistry. Without Cox's grounded presence, the show might have spun too far into romantic comedy territory. Instead, Monica became the anchor, the apartment owner, the motherly figure, the perfectionist who made everyone else shine brighter. Cox trusted her instincts, and she was right. In the end, Friends wasn't just built on chemistry, it was built on 6 actors daring to play exactly who they were meant to be. The cast negotiated salaries as one unit. By the time Friends reached its 3rd season, the show was a ratings monster. Each actor could have demanded more money individually, but they did something unheard of in television history: they united. David Schwimmer and Jennifer Aniston first proposed it. We all go in together, or not at all. The others agreed. Their goal wasn't greed, it was fairness. NBC executives panicked, worried the strategy might set a dangerous precedent. But the 6 friends held the line. They refused to sign separate contracts. If one actor earned less, they all walked away. The standoff worked. By the show's final 2 seasons, each cast member was earning a then record-breaking $1 million per episode. It was a groundbreaking deal, setting a standard for ensemble casts across Hollywood. What's fascinating is that the decision wasn't just about money, it was about loyalty. They'd built their fame together, and they wanted to protect that unity. When other studios asked why they didn't compete for higher pay individually, Lisa Kudrow replied simply, "We started as equals, and will end as equals." That act of solidarity mirrored the very friendship they portrayed on screen. 6 actors, 1 voice, 1 paycheck, and a legacy that redefined how television casts negotiate power. Lisa Kudrow feared she'd be fired early on. Before Friends became a phenomenon, Lisa Kudrow was nervous, painfully so. Having been replaced on Frasier before its premiere, she walked into the Friends set convinced history would repeat itself. During early rehearsals, she felt Phoebe Buffay was too weird and worried the studio audience wouldn't connect. Her fear wasn't unfounded. NBC executives questioned whether Phoebe's eccentric lines would alienate viewers. But that changed during the first live taping. Kudrow improvised a line about Smelly Cat and delivered it with total sincerity. The audience erupted. Writers saw it instantly. Kudrow's odd timing and gentle delivery were lightning in a bottle. They began tailoring jokes to her style, giving Phoebe storylines that leaned into her unpredictable wisdom. Kudrow later admitted she still battled self-doubt throughout the first season. But her character's uniqueness became one of Friends' defining traits. No one else could have made lines about lobsters, twins, and energy fields sound so heartfelt. By season 3, she had an Emmy on her shelf, proof that the weird one had quietly become the show's secret weapon. What once terrified her turned into her strength. Phoebe wasn't a misfit. She was the soul of Friends, and Lisa Kudrow made her unforgettable. Central Perk's couch was found in a basement. That famous orange couch at Central Perk, the one where every major conversation unfolded, wasn't custom built. It was found abandoned in the Warner Brothers storage basement. The set designer spotted it under a dusty tarp, faded and forgotten from an old movie set. Its vibrant color stood out immediately. They cleaned it, reupholstered it, and moved it to the center of the cafe set without realizing it would become television's most recognizable piece of furniture. The couch soon became a symbol, the stage where friendship unfolded and life changed one coffee at a time. Over the years, it suffered damage from constant filming, water spills, and even crew members sitting on it between takes. Twice, the studio considered replacing it, but audiences noticed subtle differences, forcing them to repair the original instead. After the series finale, Warner Brothers preserved it in their museum. When fans tour the studio lot today, they still line up to take photos on the same couch that saw 10 years of laughter, heartbreak, and cappuccinos. That piece of furniture wasn't just set decoration, it was silent witness to a cultural movement. What began as a forgotten prop became a throne for television royalty. The word Friends never appears in the theme song. Here's one of those bizarre trivia facts that most fans never notice. The title song, I'll Be There For You, by the Rembrandts, never actually includes the word friends. When NBC first approached the band, they were told to write something catchy, upbeat, and about loyalty. The original demo was a breakup song. The producers simply asked them to rewrite it into something that sounded hopeful, but not romantic. The result? A 42-second version that captured the show's message without ever using its name. When audiences first heard it, no one realized the irony. The song that defined friendship never mentioned the word once. The Rembrandts later expanded it into a full single for radio, and it topped the charts for 8 weeks straight. Even the clapping pattern between verses was an accidental studio joke that producers decided to keep. That tiny sound became a generational reflex, an instinct every fan still performs without thinking. The music video, featuring the 6 cast members dancing in the fountain, turned a sitcom theme into an anthem of connection. Sometimes, the best things don't need to say their names. They just make you feel them. Gunther wasn't supposed to be a recurring character. Gunther, the quiet, bleach blonde barista hopelessly in love with Rachel, wasn't even meant to speak. Actor James Michael Tyler was hired purely because he knew how to operate an espresso machine. For the first 33 episodes, he stood silently behind the counter, watching the main cast. Then, one day, a line was added. Yeah, the delivery was perfect. The audience laughed, and suddenly, Gunther had a name and a story. Tyler's distinct platinum hair was also a total accident. His friend had dyed it before an early shoot for practice, and producers loved the look so much they made it permanent. Over 10 seasons, Gunther went from an extra to a fan favorite with more than 150 appearances. What made him unforgettable wasn't his words, but his quiet presence. He was the seventh friend nobody noticed, the constant observer of their chaos, heartbreak, and joy. When the series ended, Tyler said he was honored just to have stood in the background of something that made the world laugh. His journey from barista for a day to beloved icon proves that in Friends, even the smallest roles brewed up something special. Matthew Perry wrote some of Chandler's funniest lines. Chandler Bing's sarcasm was so sharp it could cut glass, and that was no accident. Matthew Perry, known for his quick wit, rewrote several of his lines moments before filming. He'd read a joke and say, "That's not how Chandler would say it," then replace it with something faster, funnier, or darker. The writers quickly realized his instincts were gold. Soon, Perry was unofficially part of the writing process. Some of the show's most iconic one-liners, "Could I be wearing any more clothes?" and "I'm not great at advice. Can I interest you in a sarcastic comment?" came directly from him. Writers even began mimicking his delivery style in later scripts. But Perry's genius came from more than jokes. He added emotional depth to Chandler's insecurities, turning a one-dimensional comic relief role into the show's beating heart. His timing and self-deprecating humor gave audiences permission to laugh at their own awkwardness. Behind the scenes, castmates said Perry's ability to improvise kept everyone on their toes. He wasn't just acting, he was sculpting. Every sarcastic grin, every anxious laugh came from his creative fingerprints. Chandler wasn't written by one man, he was co-authored by the very person who played him. The cast's final scene left the crew in tears. When the director called cut on the final scene of Friends, no one moved. The 6 actors stayed in a tight embrace, crying quietly as hundreds of crew members stood in silence. 10 years of their lives had ended with that one word. Jennifer Aniston later said, "It wasn't just the show ending, it was our 20s." The director kept cameras rolling to capture the unscripted emotion. Once the set cleared, the cast returned to Monica's apartment one last time. They wandered through the empty rooms, touching the furniture that had witnessed every moment of their decade together. Crew members noticed Polaroids taped under tables and behind doors, private memories the actors had hidden throughout the years. That night, after everyone left, a stagehand locked the door and hung a sign. Stage 24, the Friends stage. Warner Brothers has never reused it for another show. The space remains a quiet tribute, untouched, preserved in spirit. The moment wasn't staged. It was goodbye in its purest form. And for millions of fans, watching that empty apartment fade to black was like losing a part of themselves too. Friends wasn't just television, it was a mirror of youth, laughter, and growing up in a city that never stood still. Behind every joke was a secret. Behind every smile, a story. And the strangest part is how these weird, tiny details, a fountain, a couch, a song without its title, helped shape one of the most perfect sitcoms ever made. Which of these shocked you most? Let us know in the comments. Hit like if you smiled, and subscribe for more secrets hidden behind the laughter.